Mom. I puked on the drive home to Provo. I wasn't sick or anxious. Claire's driving was just quite terrible that morning. I ruined her sister's hoodie, but promised to wash and return it. Days passed. On a whim that was not at all related to how utterly miserable I was, I felt the need to come out to Mom. I had a dream around that time that put the idea into my head. It went like this. I was sitting at the center of a single row of chairs in an empty movie theater. To my left sat Mom, then my stepdad. To my right sat a man. We were all watching a movie. The man beside me made me uncomfortable. I was leaning toward Mom, even laying my head on her shoulder to prove I was ignoring the man. The movie progressed. I shifted, and by accident, I found my head leaning on the man's arm to my right instead of Mom's. Panic over my actions sent me back upright in fear over what Mom would think. I hadn't meant to. It was an accident. I looked at her with dread, knowing she had seen me leaning on the man. But she was smiling. She wasn't hurt. She was happy for me. It would all be fine. I could be honest. I called her. Perhaps I should have come out in person, but calling seemed appropriate. Coming out to a parent could be like tearing off a Band-Aid. Or so I thought. The conversation meandered for 20 minutes as I tried to guide the conversation toward coming out. I was terrible at this, but I suppose if coming out were easy, more people would do it. How was school? Mom asked. Classes are good. I hadn't called to talk about school, but course correcting was scary. I was pacing through the grounds at Heritage Halls. There were these concrete barriers for landscaping that I liked to walk on while talking on the phone. My first round of tests is coming up. Are you ready? Mom asked. Yeah. Annoyance at the perceived accusation rippled through my capillaries. My parents following up about my grades always made me defensive, like they didn't trust me after my first year of school. My schedule is mostly generals this semester, so my classes aren't exactly hard. I paused before giving in to my impulse to stir the pot. I still have time to write and stuff. She gave her regular pause in response, calculating how best to address my writing. Just make sure you prioritize school. My pacing stopped along the concrete barrier, causing me to sway in the night breeze. I know, Mom. I'm just saying, Mom said. You may enjoy writing, but it's really important you finish school and get a job. And I'm just saying I'm doing fine. I had called for a reason, but I didn't even feel like continuing the conversation by now. Writing was the only goal I had ever really cared about, the only ambition I claimed for my own. Somehow it had branded me as unambitious. My phone buzzed in my hand, Claire texting me. I gotta go. Okay, Mom said. I love you. I raged at myself for not having guided the conversation better. No, wait, Mom? You still there? Yes. I let out a silent breath. I called to tell you something, and there's really no easy way to say this, so I think I should just come out and say it. My words were a train wreck spewing out of my mouth. I'm gay. Silence stretched on from the phone as another text from Claire buzzed my hand. I closed my eyes. It doesn't mean anything. I'm still gonna marry a woman and be in the church. I guess I just wanted you to know. Another text from Claire. How long have you known? Mom asked. Since I was a kid. The conversation stretched on for another half hour. Mom, of course, experienced some shock and had to cope with the shift of perspective on her own. I made the mistake of coming out when I was already frustrated and defensive. That made me more hostile than I should have been. I was blunt and not particularly considerate. I didn't even understand my reasons for coming out, other than I wanted to do it in advance of any significant life changes. But you're still dating Claire, aren't you? Mom said as the conversation was winding down. Yeah. Hesitation rattled my voice. Night had descended over Provo. Claire's fifth text vibrated my phone. I don't necessarily plan to date men anytime soon, but this is just something I'm dealing with. Okay, Mom said. You coming to the funeral? Maybe we can talk again then. Yeah, see you this weekend. The call ended. I snuck into my apartment, ignoring Claire's avalanche of messages, and went to bed. My great-aunt had died earlier that week. Being the only kid living in Utah, I had planned to attend the funeral with Mom. But first, USGA on Thursday. I parked in the basement garage of the library and dashed upstairs. Each time I attended USGA, the world seemed to right itself. This week was no exception. A full room prevented me from sitting beside Easton. I settled into my usual back seat. Easton was alone up front. He glanced at me and smiled. I waved. At the meeting's end, I rushed up to regale Easton with tales of coming out to Mom. He nodded with approval. That's a big step. I shrugged, minimizing the event's importance. The meeting had just ended, and people were filtering out of the library conference room. Good luck at home, Easton said in parting. Thanks. I shuffled, banishing thoughts of hugging him, and left. I somehow felt able to handle anything after that. Coming out to Mom the other day had been a dicey conversation, but I was excited to see her again. Talking things through in a more productive way felt vital. Easton's approval gave me ridiculous levels of confidence. I drove home. Mom and I talked every waking hour of that weekend. It seemed she had been thinking about how to address this as well. We had never had such candid conversations. All those times my tongue was paralyzed as a child suddenly seemed a tragedy instead of a necessity. The only time we stopped talking was for the funeral. When that was over, we got in the car and continued. We returned home, and I showed her a YouTube video I had found called It Gets Better at BYU. She had a pained look on her face by the end. Is that really what it's like? Are those the emotions you felt growing up? I felt a weight press down on my shoulders. Part of me loved that she had asked such a genuine question. To me, it felt like she was internalizing what I was saying and taking it seriously. Another part of me dreaded that there were no good answers to that question. Yeah, in some ways, I did feel that way growing up. Sometimes I felt alone, and I never knew how to fix it. I don't blame you, though. We were all just trying to piece ourselves together after what happened with Dad. I feel bad you dealt with that on your own. Mom's face took on a haunted quality. Were you ever suicidal? Sometimes, I admitted. There was just this constant dread growing up, knowing that one day I might give in or something. You should know that I would have been devastated if you had done anything to yourself, Mom said. I can't even think about it. Suicide hasn't been an issue for me in a while, but I would be lying if I said it's not something I dealt with. I felt insanely exposed saying something like this to Mom of all people. This was the conversation I had wanted, needed to have for over a decade and had never been able to say it. Those kind of thoughts program your mind in a way. It's hard to come out of. I know. Mom watched me before looking back at the living room. Believe me, I know. None of the other kids know this, but when you were about 2, I almost attempted suicide. I planned to do it when you were at the neighbor's house. I had the pills ready and had planned it to the point where I knew who would find my body because I was so afraid that one of you kids would find me. Mom suddenly seemed so much more human and mortal than I had ever imagined. We had all been hurt in the divorce, but I had never expected this. She had experienced the pain and hurt that could lead a person to want to take their life. The isolation, loneliness, or self-hatred that made self-termination seem the best path forward. Mom continued, seeming equally cathartic. I've had people over the years ask me how I got through everything, and I guess it just comes down to I choose to be happy. She paused with irony on her face. When I'm not feeling like I want to die. She burst into laughter, keeling over. Soon we were both laughing and crying. I hope you realize that I would rather you be gay and with a man than dead. I know you're still dating Claire, though. She finished with a rigid intonation. As much as she wanted to protect me, she still hoped I would end up with a woman. I don't want you to be disappointed if I choose to be with a man. I felt the need to be firm with her. My life was mine. I didn't know how much longer I would date Claire, but I didn't think I could keep it up. Mom looked away. I can still hope. This is new to me. I get that, but I just want you to realize that I'm going to make the best decision for me. Maybe I won't end up with a man, but that's my choice if I do. And even if I marry a woman, I don't want you to feel vindicated. You shouldn't feel like you are right, and this was all just a phase. I need you to recognize that it's my decision, and I'm going to make the best decision for me, regardless of what anyone else thinks." Mom's expression in response was that of a mother whose child had indeed grown and was choosing for the first time to venture into the world. I looked away from her, furious at my sudden desire to cry. There was an ending in this conversation, but there was also a beginning. I'm at the point where I'm okay with myself. I think that's a huge step. It is, Mom said. I want you to be happy, and I don't want you to kill yourself. If you need to go to counseling, we can do that. I shook my head, wincing. Counseling might have been effective before my mission, but I haven't felt down for a while. It was a lie, of course, driven by shame and fear of someone learning the details of my relationship with Claire. I was already in a spiral of trauma that would continue to build until counseling was the only thing that could save my life. We sat across the kitchen island from one another, lost in separate thoughts. I know I wasn't the best mom, but I tried, Mom said. Why would you ever believe you weren't a good mom? My tone was perhaps too blunt, but I just couldn't understand how she could feel this way. I never knew what to do, and your teenage years were hard for me, Mom said. Well, yeah, it was a hard time for all of us. Dad left, I said. That's not your fault. I know, but you were all along for the ride, Mom said. And that wasn't fair. Mom, I'm not angry at you. I know it was hard, really, I do, but you handled it better than anyone could have expected. You went back to school and reassembled our lives. I saw you regain your identity. You never gave up, and you built something better. Thanks for saying that, she said. I really tried to make sure you had a good relationship with him, even after what happened. I know, I said. Remember the first time I came back from visiting Dad after he left? We were gardening out front. You asked me what I thought about Ava. I gave you a list of everything awful about her. But then you got all serious and said it was okay for me to like her. You told me to form an opinion independent of the other kids. You never let her existence threaten you, and you encouraged me to have a relationship with her. I've seen the divorced parents of my friends poison the water, but you never did. You wanted me to be happy, and in a way, you gave me permission to be. I always thought it was important for you to have a relationship with your dad, and Ava by extension, Mom said. You can't know how hard it was for me to do that. But I stand by it. He's your dad. And regardless of what you or I think he deserves, you deserve to have a good relationship with him. How could you think you're a bad mom? I asked in disbelief. That's just the dumbest thing I've ever heard. It's different on the other side, Mom said. No one's there telling you what to do or how to be, and you beat yourself up over your mistakes. Well, stop it, I said. How you handled everything at every turn was incredible. Mom compressed her lips. You were a pretty good kid. Dang straight, I said. I was the best freaking kid you ever had. Mom laughed. Don't tell the others. We ate dinner on Sunday, just me, Mom, and my stepdad. The weekend had been a wonderful refuge from the discomfort that had become my life. Returning to school filled me with both hope and dread. Thoughts of Claire returned only anxiety. I had hoped things between us would stabilize, that she would begin acting like a reasonable person who showed respect befitting the love she claimed to have for me. Nothing had improved, yet talking with Mom about my real feelings, beyond my family, the church, and Claire, made me hopeful for the life I could build. I was almost ready to reach out and take it. Even so, a few flaxen cords still bound me to my current life, and Claire. I gathered my things to leave for Provo. Mom walked me to the door. I paused at the door before slipping outside. I love you,